Hello and welcome to Billy's Craft Room. This tutorial is part of my online workshop series, Adventures in Acrylics. For more information about this, please visit the blog. In today's film, I'm going to show you how to create a dark wood paint effect. The finished results look something like mahogany or maybe rosewood. Whatever you want to call it, it's a really beautiful effect. Because I'm using fluid acrylic paints or a flow formula paint, the finished result is quite flat, which is ideal if you want to stamp over it or perhaps art journal. For a more dimensional effect, try using heavy-bodied acrylics. For this project, I'm going to be using Galleria Flow Formula acrylic paint made by Winsor & Newton. The colours I'll be using are buff titanium, burnt sienna and burnt umber. You need something to mix your colours on. I'm using a white enamel plate. They're easy to get hold of and it's easy to clean. You'll need a jar of water and a palette knife. I find this shape really useful. It doesn't need to be a metal one. The little plastic ones are just fine. The cardstock I'm working on is mount board. It's already white. I haven't gessoed the piece. You'll also need a piece of cotton rag to help clean your tools. I'm working on a craft sheet, again because it's easy to clean, and I've got a protective mat over the table as well. The first colour I'm going to apply is the buff titanium. Pick up a small amount onto your palette knife and apply it to the board as if you were buttering bread. You don't want to be too mean with it, but you don't want too heavy an application either. Vary the direction in which you apply the paint, as this helps to build texture in the piece. You don't need to completely cover it, and leaving a few areas of white will help show through the later layers. Here's how the piece looks at this point. You now need to set it aside to dry completely before you move on. Clean your palette knife by dipping it into the water to remove the excess paint and wiping it off on the rag before you apply the next colour. Now that the earlier layer has dried, the next colour up is burnt sienna. As before, I'm going to be using a palette knife to apply the colour. Pick up a small amount of burnt sienna onto your palette knife, and this time I'm going to apply the colour in patches. By changing direction and applying the paint in patches like this, it's building more texture into the piece. You don't need to completely cover the lighter colours. Try to leave some of the buff titanium visible and also the odd white area as well. These lighter areas will still be visible once we add the darker colour. Here's how the piece looks at this point. You now need to set it aside to dry completely before you move on. Don't forget to clean your palette knife using the water and the rag. Now that the earlier layers have dried, the next colour up is burnt umber. I'm still going to use the palette knife, but this time I'm applying a lot more paint to it. Although you're only going to put a thin layer of paint onto the board, you do want a generous amount of paint on the knife. This time I'm going to swipe the colour completely over the whole board. If possible, try to do this in as few strokes as possible. Because the paint does dry quite quickly, although you're applying the paint quite thickly, as you swipe back over it, you are removing most of it. You need to work reasonably quickly because the longer the paint is on there, it does risk it starting to dry and you not being able to move it. Continue until you have an effect that you like, but it's better to leave the layers to dry for a while and then go back in with extra paint if you want it darker, rather than overworking it. Like nail varnish, if you go back over the areas too many times and they're only partially dried, you do risk disturbing that paint layer. And here's how the finished piece looks. Set this aside to dry, and by varying the different colours that you use throughout the project or for your base layers, you'll get different wood effects. Don't forget to put your palette knife into water and to clean it as soon as you finish using it. In these examples, the first card has a burnt sienna base in place of the buff titanium. The centre one was the one I created in the film today, and the final one has a layer of gloss medium. As you can see, they do look quite different. Each piece you create will be unique, but they're a lot of fun to experiment with. And here's how I used my dark wood panels. This is a Coptic stitch book with Billy's book ties as a closure. See you next time for more adventures in acrylics. For more inspiration, please visit the blog on www.billyscraftroom.co.uk.